For a decade now, and particularly since the global financial meltdown, Europe's racist and far-right movements have experienced a surge not seen since World War II. In Britain, a series of rightist movements from the BNP to the EDL and now UKIP have surfed this wave. France's Front National topped the Euro polls last year and are now leading in some of the polls for the presidential election. The neo-Nazi Golden Dawn in Greece became the third party in Greek politics. It controlled the streets with violent gangs linked to police until the murder of hip-hop artist Pavlos Fyssas led to a government crackdown. In the most recent elections, it still came third. Hungary's fascist Jobbik party saw its vote rise from 2% in 2006 to 20% last year. It is now the third party in the national parliament. Germany's racist street movement Pegida, started in Dresden by a PR man and Hitler impersonator named Lutz Bachmann, has drawn tens of thousands to the streets in anti-Muslim protests. A grave situation. So why should it be that many European media outlets, despite gestures of deference to liberal democratic values, have been remarkably friendly to this new far right? Why, for example, were Golden Dawn thugs, when not stabbing immigrants to death in the streets and assaulting political opponents, treated like respectable eminences on national television shows? Why did the Greek daily Kathimerini welcome Golden Dawn, saying that believers in democracy owe them a big thank you for confronting the supposed violence of the left? Why did the newspaper Tovima, in the same week, suggest that left-wing protesters were worse than the Italian fascist squads? Why did the French state television channel France 2 give Marine Le Pen a kid gloves interview before the last election? Why did France's political journalists give a Front National politician an award for Local Politician of the Year? And why did the Socialist Party-aligned Le Monde borrow a phrase from the extreme right to describe the leftist Front de Gauche as a foreign party? Why did the Pegida movement find a champion in the Frankfurter Allgemeine Zeitung? "We are all Dresden," said a recent editorial when police shut down a Pegida protest to avoid riots. This despite the fact that a recent Pegida rally resulted in a knife attack on migrants in a nearby shopping centre. Why was Tommy Robinson of the English Defence League courted and promoted by the UK media while his goons terrorised Muslims? Why has the racist provocateur Nigel Farage been promoted out of all proportion to his real support? What about Hungary, where the media have been prevented from even describing Jobbik, a violent movement which declares that its goal is to overthrow parliamentary democracy, as a far-right party? Part of the explanation may be that the existing political elites have themselves indulged the far right. Following the Charlie Hebdo massacre, for example, President Hollande invited the leader of France's Front National, Marine Le Pen, to the Élysée for a high-profile meeting. He reportedly promised her that he would begin a national conversation about Islamic fundamentalism. However, it goes much deeper than that. The media doesn't merely pander to the far right. It gives them their language, their talking points, their issues. And this, once again, is closely related to the strategies of the extreme centre parties. During the decade or so in which the far right has climbed in the polls and gained in the streets, one issue has been at the centre of more controversies than any other: immigration. In Greece, this took a bloody turn as the anti-immigrant violence of Golden Dawn was prefaced by years of media furore about immigration and by government and police crackdowns. Particularly in the period from 2010 to 2012, the daily newspapers from Kathimerini to Tanea were filled with rhetoric comparing immigration to a war, an invasion, a tsunami, an occupation, a siege, a pillage, a bomb, an infection, a disease, an explosive situation, and a proliferation of crime. In the Czech Republic, it is not just the far right, but the mainstream media that refers to Roma gypsies, historically victims of Nazi genocide, as the inadaptable people, incapable of being assimilated into normal society. The same media provoked a nationwide series of attacks on Roma by misreporting an insignificant local brawl in Sluknov as a race attack by Roma against Czech citizens. In a similar way, the UK press complains of immigrants that they've stolen all our jobs, stereotypes Eastern European migrants as thieves, gangs, beggars, squatters, and criminals, and warns that 1 in 5 Britons will be ethnics in the future. Often the media simply amplifies official scaremongering and communicates policy justifications that feed into support for the far right. For example, in Britain, New Labour imprisoned asylum seekers and denied them access to benefits in order to prove their anti-immigrant mettle, thus legitimising media claims that refugees were bogus and validating the far right. The French government's brutal treatment of migrants in Calais has given respectability to the Front National's racism, handing them an issue to mobilise around. In Italy, it is the obscene crackdown on immigrants after the sinking of a migrant boat at Lampedusa which gave the racist right new life. 130 died in the sinking, but the 155 survivors immediately became suspects in a criminal investigation. Why? Because of an amendment tabled by 2 senators from the supposedly anti-establishment Five Star Movement, which called for immigration to be made a crime punishable by €10,000 fine. Footage later emerged of the brutal treatment of migrants at the island's detention facilities, which the island's mayor likened to a concentration camp. But the cutting edge of anti-immigrant racism in Europe is Islamophobia, and here France is the undisputed leader. It is a country where leading journalists such as Claude Imbert of the respected conservative magazine Le Point proudly claim to be Islamophobes. A recent cover of the magazine featuring an image of a Muslim woman wearing a niqab bore the headline, "Brazen Islam in schools, cafeterias, hospitals and swimming pools." Prime Minister Manuel Valls, when asked about the cover, merely said, "It expresses a reality." The magazine Lviv reported on the Islamic threat to schools, illustrated with a hijab-wearing Muslim woman. Closely following France is the UK, where it's not just right-wing tabloids pushing sensationalist headlines like "Muslims tell us how to run our schools." Even Labour-supporting columnists such as Polly Toynbee can describe herself without embarrassment as an Islamophobe and proud. Or Rod Little can write in the Sunday Times, "Islamophobia? Sign me up." In Denmark, it is not just the right-wing Jyllands Posten which is behind the Danish cartoon saga on the warpath against Muslims. Almost every newspaper is anti-immigrant and anti-Muslim, and newspapers such as Information or the Berlingske think nothing of carrying statements such as "Muslims were born by pigs and think like pigs." In Germany, the tabloid newspaper Bild denounces Islam as criminal and murderous, while the more respectable Frankfurter Allgemeine Zeitung claims that Islam is contrary to German values. The obsession with bashing Muslims has different roots in different European countries. In France, it goes back to the socialist president Mitterrand and his attempt to scapegoat the country's North African migrant community for social unrest as he implemented unpopular austerity programs. Soon, popular media such as Figaro magazine were asking about French Muslims, "Will we still be French in 30 years?" And later it asked, "Immigration or invasion?" In the UK, it can be traced to the aftermath of the Rushdie affair, when the media and political class began to identify Muslims as a threat to both security and national values. Here it was not the tabloids, but respectable columnists such as Peregrine Worsthorne in The Telegraph, who identified Islam as a primitive enemy, fit only to be sensitively subjugated. Conor Cruise O'Brien in The Times, who characterised Muslim society as sick, or Charles Moore in The Spectator, who warned that the hooded hordes will win if Britain didn't adopt a more racist immigration policy. In other European countries, September 11th provided the cue. In each case, however, the shift by the media prompted parties of the far right to begin to change their strategies to take advantage of the new terrain. But they were enabled by the media's aggressive prosecution of Islam, using decontextualized snippets from the Quran to argue that it needed to be policed. As Britain's Telegraph put it, this war is not about terror, it is about Islam. There was a considerable overlap between the language of the far right and that of the press, as they cited the same decontextualized quotes from the Quran to justify their denunciations of Islam. Whether it was Nick Griffin denouncing Islam as an aggressive religion which seeks worldwide domination, Marine Le Pen denouncing mosques as an Islamo-Nazi occupation, or the far-right Swiss People's Party benefiting from a frenzied campaign calling for the banning of minarets. They all borrowed from the playbook of the mainstream media. When the Pegida movement claims to be defending Germany's Judeo-Christian culture against Islamic domination, they are borrowing from the late culture arguments which have appeared in the German newspapers. One reason, then, that many mainstream media outlets are sympathetic to the new far-right is that the fascists are using a language the media helped craft. Not only that, but they are using issues which the dominant parties of the neoliberal centre linked to the major media outlets have themselves created, from New Labour in Britain to New Democracy in Greece. Finally, in some cases it turns out that the mainstream media, while committed to parliamentarism, consider the far right a useful ally against the left. The far right owes a big thank you to the media.